All right, so this training will go over different ways to do conflict resolution. This one specifically, I'm going to go over in the different age groups though. So I've done a conflict resolution before, but it was very minimal and just kind of as a whole instead of in the different age groups. I do only go up to age 5 in this training though, because majority of the daycares are infants to 5 or 6-year-olds. But your older kids, it's typically a lot easier to try and do conflict resolution with them than trying to know how to do conflict resolution with the younger ages. So starting out, your infants, we're going to go over your typical behaviors that you see in them and then the ways to best resolve those. So typically in your infants, they tend to stick to themselves. They don't really interact with other kids. They mostly rely on adults for everything. And then they do grab onto anything by them. So that can cause most of your what you could call conflicts. If there's another kid right next to them, they could grab onto their hair just because that's their natural reflex is to just hold on to everything. So it's nothing that they should be getting in trouble over because again, it's a reflex, not really a behavior that you're trying to fix. But that is their natural tendency. And then they don't know how to share, but again, they don't really need to share. If they are old enough to start crawling, like if they are crawling or rolling or scooting, they can tend to go over to other kids and take the toys that the other kids have. So again, a point of conflict. But the best way to resolve anything in the infant group is mostly move them away from each other. Most of the kids in this age group can't move on themselves by themselves yet. So if you simply put them in a different space on the floor and give them a different toy, they aren't going to take other kids' toys again because they can't. And they won't be grabbing onto the other kids because again, they're not in reach. If they are old enough to be moving around and they do go back to the other child, try to distract them with another toy or book, give them more attention. You can, if in the classroom they have bouncers or the bumbo seats or different things like that, you can put them in those seats as well if the issue keeps coming up. But again, at this age and stage, there's not really any consequences other than just moving them away from the other kids so that they're not grabbing on or taking toys away. For your toddler stage / your more mobile infants, so you're getting closer to your year-olds and your 1.5 years, they still don't know how to share, but they are starting to interact more and more with other kids. They still mostly rely on adults though for entertainment and majority of their social aspect. With them being more mobile though, they are going to try to steal toys from other kids. So this is where a lot of our conflict resolution is going to come in play. They are still learning their environment and the things around them through their 5 senses. So do expect that they are going to put everything in their mouths. So again, it's natural. It's what they're supposed to be doing, to be learning. It's how their brain is developing. So it's not something to necessarily get them in trouble over, but we are needing to teach them, hey, we aren't supposed to just put gross, yucky food that's been on the floor in our mouths. And then at this age and stage, to express their emotions, they are starting to hit and bite to communicate. But again, it's how they know best to express their emotions. So nothing to really get them in a lot of trouble over yet, but we are supposed to be explaining to them proper mannerisms and behavior. So conflict resolution, again, remove them from the situation if they are hitting, biting, not sharing, taking toys, different things like that. The distraction is so honestly successful with this age group typically. So you remove them from the situation, you put them someplace else, then distract them with toys, books, or songs. Really interact with them, because again, what they're doing is not wrong in the sense of it is natural for them to be doing this. So they just need a little bit of help with the distraction. And then again, you can start to introduce things like, it's not okay to hit, it's not okay to take toys, it's not nice. That makes our friends feel sad when we take toys away from them, or we hit or bite, it hurts them. So again, just the start to introduce why we don't hit or bite. Again, not something that you're going to get them in a lot of trouble over. Just introducing it so that they're aware of that, so that as they get to the older stages, if they're still doing that, they're aware that they're not supposed to be, so then the consequence is actually fitting the crime, basically. In your actual toddlers, so these are your 2 to 3 year olds. So in this age, well, not your 3 year olds yet, this is just your 2 year olds, your toddlers, they still don't know how to share very well. So when handling that, it is still best to do the redirection and the distraction. They are starting to interact with other kids in play. They'll move from just parallel play, where they play the same game but just side by side, not really interacting. They'll move from that into your more actual co-play, where they start playing trucks with each other. They want to play house. They want to play tag, different things. That's starting to develop in this age, although mostly in your toddlers, they're still in the parallel play. And then they still express their feelings through their actions, such as hitting, biting, taking toys, throwing, screaming, yelling, different things like that. So when it comes to conflict resolution, like I said, again, the redirection is best, distracting. You also, at this age, it's best to model how to play with other kids. So if they are trying to take the toys away from somebody else, say you're using Legos, you can say, instead of taking, because that's not nice, how about we help, like we both build a castle. So you can help them kind of transition from that parallel play into the co-play as well. So modeling how to do it, even if they don't really want to, you can sit there and actually play with the other child that they were trying to take away from. And they learn by example and through others' actions. So that's a really good way to kind of help conflict resolve at this age as well. And then again, moving from just introducing why something is not okay to explaining the action they did, why it's not okay, and then naming the emotion that they are probably feeling. So if they are taking toys away from kids, be like, I know you don't really want to share. I know it's hard. It can be frustrating when you were playing with the toys first. But there are plenty of toys, so we need to be sharing. That's kind, and it hurts our other friends' feelings. It makes them sad when we don't share. So again, just kind of that conflict resolution, explaining things a lot at this age and stage. And then if they still continue to take toys away, you can start to, and the redirection isn't helping, then you can start to put them just in a corner by themselves for a little bit, maybe read them a book or play with them individually. Give them a few minutes, like explain to them that they need to sit down for just 3 minutes by themselves before they can come back to play. All of those things are good with this age group. Moving on, your toddlers and 2 year olds. I just really went over that with your toddlers. So they're starting to form sentences, but they're still mostly using actions. That's really the only thing that's different between your toddlers and your 2 year olds. But again, you can start to introduce the different stages of discipline, such as, like I said, the starting with redirection, moving then to playing one-on-one with them, that distraction. And then if they really still need it, putting them just by themselves for a little bit to help them calm down before introducing them back into the play scenario. But the key thing here that I didn't mention before, though, is explaining what the next step will be. So if they hit somebody, you walk over, you try to redirect, you say, you know, that we don't really hit, that makes our friends feel sad, that hurts. So we need to come over here and play with something else. And if you hit them again, we can't play with those toys anymore. We're gonna have to do something else. And then if they hit again, you know, you reiterate, I told you that if you did that, we'd have to move someplace else and do something different. So then you move on to the one-on-one play with them, possibly reading a book, trying to really just calm them down. And then after that, again, saying now you can go play again, but if you hit again, we're going to need to go sit by the wall and just calm down for a second by ourselves. So really explaining the next steps, making sure that they're not just out of the blue. They need that consistency and they need the follow-up. So if you tell them that a consequence is going to happen, you need to follow through on that consequence. Which is why making consequences be something like you can't eat lunch, or you can't go outside, or you can't have snack. Those are not okay consequences because you cannot actually hold them back from food. And you can't leave them inside by themselves. So if everybody's going outside, you have to take them outside too. So consequences that you can actually follow through on are the best consequences to actually give. Because again, they need that follow through, they need the consistency, or else they're going to think that they can just get away with everything and they're not going to actually learn from it either. So your 3-year-olds, they should be able to communicate pretty well by now. They're starting to form full-on sentences, not just a couple words. And they're starting to know what the emotions that they are feeling are, and they can see those emotions, and they can name the emotions in other people as well. This age group, they still don't really like sharing, but they've had practice with it. They've been explained why it's not okay not to share. They've been why it's not okay to take toys. So while they still don't really like to, they do understand how to, and they know that it's not okay not to share or to take toys. They are more able to identify, again, their own emotions and other people's emotions. So it is a lot easier when you are trying to explain why things are not okay. Like, they understand that when you say that made them upset, angry, that hurt them, that made them sad, they can identify emotions at this point. So those are really good things to use when you're explaining situations to them. And then they're starting to problem solve by themselves. So if they see that one of their friends is upset or sad, they do know how to go over and kind of help them as well. So because they're starting to problem solve, you can start introducing things like, if a friend takes your toy, tell them that's not okay, because they are able to, again, figure things out for themselves. So for your 3-year-olds, conflict resolution, you really should be moving away from the redirection at this point, and going more into the conversations and you hit them, so we aren't able to play with that anymore. So moving from the redirection to the just taking them away from the situation. Still explain the feelings and make sure that you identify with this kid. So if they had a toy, somebody else took it, so they hit the kid, you can say that you understand that they were frustrated or that it made you upset that this friend took your toy, but it's not okay to hit. We need to use our words instead, or come up to an adult and tell us instead of just hitting. And then you'll start to move through the consequence chain with fewer reminders. So in your toddler to 2-year-olds, you would probably be doing 1 or 2 reminders before you actually follow through on the consequence. With this one, it's kind of, no, I told you that this would happen, so it's going to be happening now. And then encourage them to apologize. Forcing a kid to apologize isn't very beneficial, but you can highly encourage them. I like to encourage giving hugs if the other person is okay with that. So if Tommy hit Susie, explaining to Tommy that that wasn't okay, that hurt Susie's feelings and it hurt her, like she's sad now. And so we really should probably apologize, say sorry to her, and let's give her a hug. If Susie is willing to receive the hug, awesome, that's great. If not, don't continue to force Tommy to give a hug because Susie doesn't want it. But that's normally how I encourage them to apologize, is even if they don't verbally say, I'm sorry, just giving them a hug kind of expresses that same thing. And then your 4 and 5-year-olds are going to start being pretty similar as well. But 4-year-olds, they've had a lot of practice with sharing how they're feeling. They've had a lot of practice sharing toys. They've had a lot of practice playing with other kids. And they've started to move away from the hitting stage and more just taking things or yelling. They're a lot more verbally expressive at this point. They want to be involved in everything and don't like being left out. And so that can sometimes be a conflict that arises. And then typically this is when the tattling stage kicks in. So conflict resolution, or just different things to try and help with this, really try to encourage them talking things through by themselves. So if one of these kids comes up to you and says, hey, so-and-so, my boy, let's say, okay, let's go talk to them. And then encourage that kid while you're still closely monitoring. Encourage them to talk it out, really express to each other the feelings that they're having, that they're going through. And then encourage them too to start to play together. Like if you both want to play with this toy, why don't you play together? And then with them yelling is obviously better than hitting or just taking. But explaining that while that is better than hitting, we really should probably use our inside voice and talk things through calmly. People are more willing to listen, and we just need to be using inside voices instead of yelling when we're frustrated. And then when it comes to the tattling stage, encourage the kids to talk to an adult when they can't figure it out on their own. So if Tommy and Susie are playing together and then all of a sudden Tommy does something that Susie doesn't like, Susie comes up to you again, encourage them to try to talk themselves and encourage them to do it before bringing in an adult, like really try to get them to do that problem solving by themselves. And then if somebody outside of the group comes up and tattles on somebody else, I personally don't find it a problem. Like, I don't really get mad at the kid for coming up and tattling, but explain to them that if they are trying to figure it out by themselves, that's okay. If the people involved in the situation are really that upset, they can come and talk to me about it. But we are trying to encourage them to problem solve by themselves. Obviously, if there's hitting, punching, anything like that going on, you need to involve yourself immediately. But if they're talking things through, they're okay to do that. And then if things look like they're still not being resolved and it's getting more towards the yelling stage, then you should probably insert yourself into the situation as well to try and help with that conflict resolution as well. But again, encouraging them really at this stage to do things amongst themselves to try and problem solve. And the last one that we'll talk about are 5-year-olds. Really, you're moving on from the 4-year-olds to the 5-year-olds. They should be able to communicate with each other, need very little adult intervention. They've had so much practice with all of these things that consequences will be done typically because they're already established. So instead of doing reminders, it's just, well, you know that when you hit, you need to go sit down by the wall for a few minutes and calm down. Or if you hit, you know it's not okay, and so you're not able to play with this toy for the rest of the day or until after lunch, whatever you feel the situation needs. So you're moving away from reminders really into just the immediate consequences, because your 5-year-olds know. And in your 5-year-old classrooms, there's typically set rules that they go over. So they know the rules of the classroom, they know the rules of playing, they know the different things. So you don't need to do as much of the consequence chain, as it's just, they know what's going on. And then again, same with the 4-year-olds. If they come up to you and tell you that something is wrong, encourage them to talk about it amongst themselves, still go over with them. And then when things do happen, just really talking about why it's not okay, reminding them that the situations that they're in, like if they're not sharing, like you can request to play by yourself, but if you're wanting to play by yourself, you need to make sure that there are some blocks for other people then, because you don't have to play with other people, but like you can play by yourself, but you do still have to share what you're playing with. And then if they're in a group of people and they're wanting to exclude someone, really talking through that, like, no, that's not okay. If you're playing in a group, everybody is welcome to play, unless of course that child is causing problems, and then you need to talk with that kid before you allow them to go play with that group again. So that's really conflict resolution through your different age stages. I wanted to go over conflict resolution mostly because the in-home daycares, it's hard to flip your brain when you've got different age kids all at once. So really knowing the different ways to handle it, because when a 2-year-old is doing something, their consequence is going to be different than if a 5-year-old is doing that same thing. Just because, again, the 5-year-old, they've had practice with these things, whereas the 2-year-old, they're still having a hard time just with expressing their emotions, and it's natural, it's normal for them. But the 5-year-old, again, will just have more consequences that happen faster than a 2-year-old would. So we just need to be remembering that when we are working with the different age groups, especially when we have different groups together at the same time. Because if your 5-year-old and 2-year-old are involved in the same thing, like if they both are taking toys from the same person, again, the 5-year-old will probably need to sit down for a few minutes and think about what he's done and just take a break and not really play with those toys. The 2-year-old, you're going to try to encourage to play somewhere else, but he's not going to have to sit down. And so being able to explain that to the 5-year-old as well, this is why this is happening, is really beneficial too. If you have questions about anything that we went over, my email is available at all times. You can also text into the UpKid number that's on the app. Or you can feel free, there will be a quiz at the end of this as well, mostly just so I know who has actually viewed the training. But there's a quiz linked in the description. If you have questions, there is a question or comment box as well at the very bottom. So feel free to go ahead and leave questions there as well. Hopefully everything else made sense though. If you do have questions about onboarding or anything else, again, reach out to me, as I am also the onboarding manager, but I do know a lot of things too. So if you have questions about other things, feel free to reach out to me or Tyler. Erica is also a pretty good source, as well as Chloe. So there's people you can talk to. But yeah, so that is the training for today. And we will do a training next week too.